the transport shuttle descended through the crimson atmosphere of Epsilon 9, its hull creaking against the planet's thin air. Dr. Eleliana Reeves pressed her face to the viewport, watching the barren landscape unfold below. Jagged canyons cut through rust-colored plains like scars, and in the distance, dark structures jutted from the surface like broken teeth. She felt a familiar thrill of discovery mixed with trepidation. Research Station Omega-7 coming into view, the pilot announced over the intercom. I hope you know what you're doing, Dr. Reeves. This place has been abandoned for good reason. Eleliana, or Eli, as she preferred, adjusted her equipment pack and checked her xenobiology scanner one more time. I'll manage, she replied, though her voice carried more confidence than she felt. After years of studying alien species from the safety of laboratory environments, this was her chance to observe the mysterious void fangs in their natural habitat. The shuttle touched down with a grinding thud on the station's landing pad. Through the thick transparent steel, Eli could see the abandoned research facility stretching before her like a metallic graveyard. Solar panels hung at odd angles, and atmospheric processors hummed with an irregular rhythm that suggested they were operating on emergency power alone. The previous research team had fled this place in terror, leaving behind only fragmented reports and blurry sensor readings of creatures that defied classification. As the shuttle's engines wound down, Eli gathered her courage. She was here because the United Galactic Federation needed answers. The Void Fangs had been responsible for 13 ship disappearances in this sector over the past 5 years. Most officials classified them as apex predators with no higher intelligence, dangerous animals to be avoided or eliminated, but something in the scattered reports didn't add up. The attack patterns showed coordination, even strategy. That suggested intelligence and intelligent species could potentially be reasoned with. You sure you don't want us to wait? The pilot asked as Eli moved toward the airlock. We could be back in a week to check on you. I'll be fine, Eli insisted, shouldering her pack. The UGF wants comprehensive data, and that takes time. Besides, the station's automated distress beacon will activate if anything happens. The pilot shrugged clearly, washing his hands of responsibility. Your funeral, Doc? Try not to become space creature food. The airlock cycled through its sequence, and suddenly, Eli was standing alone on the surface of Epsilon 9. The air was breathable but thin, carrying an electric taste that suggested high mineral content in the atmosphere. Above her, the sky was a deep purple red, with 2 small moons visible even in the daylight. A wind whispered across the landing pad, bringing with it the sound of something like distant singing, though Eli knew that was probably just atmospheric interference. She walked across the pad to the station's main entrance, where a biometric scanner flickered to life at her approach. After a moment of processing, the door slid open with a grinding sound. The interior was dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows down sterile corridors. Most of the research equipment appeared to be intact, though everything was covered in a fine layer of red dust. Eli spent the first few days reactivating the station's primary systems and reviewing the previous team's research. What she found was frustrating in its incompleteness. The Void Fangs were described as massive predators ranging from 10 to 20 meters in length, with serpentine bodies covered in scales that seemed to absorb light. They moved through space and atmosphere with equal ease, suggesting some form of exotic propulsion. But beyond these basic physical descriptions, the files contained little useful information. The breakthrough came on her 4th day, quite by accident. Eli was conducting a perimeter sweep with the station's external sensors when she detected movement in a canyon approximately 3 kilometers south. The readings showed a heat signature, unlike anything in the local database, too large to be any known species, and moving in a pattern that suggested injury. Against every protocol she'd been taught, Eli decided to investigate. She loaded a portable scanner and some basic medical supplies into an all-terrain rover and set out across the rocky landscape. The canyon was deeper than it appeared from the station, with walls that rose nearly 100 meters on either side. Strange crystalline formations jutted from the rock face, humming softly with what might have been piezoelectric energy. She found the source of the readings at the bottom of a narrow gulch. It was definitely a void fang, though seeing one in person was far different from reading about them in files. The creature was enormous, at least 15 meters long, with a body that seemed to flow like living liquid. Its scales shifted color constantly, creating patterns that were almost hypnotic to watch. But something was clearly wrong. One of its fins was badly torn, and dark fluid seeped from several wounds along its flanks. Eli's scientific training warred with her common sense. This was one of the galaxy's most feared predators, injured and probably desperate. The sensible thing would be to return to the station and report her findings. Instead, she found herself stepping closer, medical scanner in hand. The void fang sensed her presence immediately. Its head rose from where it had been resting against the canyon wall, and Eli found herself staring into 3 large, multifaceted eyes. They were unlike anything she'd ever seen, deep blue-black with flecks of silver that seemed to swirl like tiny galaxies. For a moment, creature and scientist regarded each other in perfect silence. Then the void fang made a sound, a low harmonic tone that seemed to resonate in Eli's bones. It wasn't threatening. If anything, it sounded almost curious. The creature's head tilted slightly, and those remarkable eyes focused on the medical kit in her hands. "You're hurt," Eli said aloud, feeling somewhat foolish for talking to what was supposedly a mindless predator. "I might be able to help." The void fang's response surprised her. Instead of attacking or retreating, it lowered its head slightly and made another soft sound, almost like it was asking a question. Eli made a decision that would change everything. She approached slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The void fang watched her come, but didn't move away. When she was close enough to touch, she carefully examined the creature's wounds. The injuries looked like they might have come from a fight with another predator, or possibly from scraping against the sharp crystal formations in the canyon. "This is going to sting a little," she said, activating a sonic cleanser to disinfect the wounds. The void fang flinched, but held still, those 3 eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that was almost unnerving. Working with careful precision, Eli cleaned and sealed the worst of the injuries. She'd brought emergency rations for herself, but looking at the creature's obvious weakness, she made another impulsive decision. She opened a packet of high-protein emergency food and offered it to the void fang. The creature examined the offering with obvious caution, bringing its head close and inhaling deeply. Then, with surprising delicacy, it accepted the food. As it ate, Eli noticed something that made her heart race with excitement. The patterns on the void fang's scales were changing. In response to the food creating what almost looked like expressions of satisfaction or gratitude. "You're not just an animal, are you?" she whispered. "You're actually intelligent." Over the following weeks, Eli returned to the canyon daily. She brought food, medical supplies, and eventually various objects to test the creature's cognitive abilities. The void fang, which she'd taken to calling Mojo, after a pet she'd had as a child, consistently demonstrated problem-solving skills that went far beyond simple animal intelligence. Mojo could manipulate complex puzzles, showed clear evidence of memory and pattern recognition, and most remarkably, began to respond to his name. When Eli spoke to him, his scales would shift to display patterns that seemed to correlate with different emotional states or concepts. She started documenting these patterns, building what might be the first void fang human communication system. The relationship developed slowly but steadily. Mojo's wounds healed, but he continued to return to the canyon where they'd first met. Sometimes Eli would find small objects arranged in neat patterns, crystals, interesting rocks, even pieces of metal that might have come from crashed ships. It was as if Mojo was leaving her gifts. 3 months into her stay on Epsilon 9, everything changed. Eli was in her makeshift laboratory, analyzing recordings of Mojo's scale patterns, when the station's proximity alarms began screaming. She rushed to the scanner array and immediately saw the problem. 3 ships were approaching the system fast, their signatures matching known pirate vessels. Eli tried to raise them on standard communication channels, but received only static in response. As the ships drew closer, she could see they were heavily armed and clearly not interested in peaceful contact. Her blood ran cold as she realized what they must want. Somehow word had gotten out about her research with the Void Fangs. The lead ship landed just outside the station's perimeter, and through the external cameras, Eli watched armed figures in environmental suits disembark. She grabbed her emergency beacon and tried to activate it, but the device showed only error messages. The pirates must have been jamming communications. The station's main door exploded inward with a shower of sparks and twisted metal. 3 pirates strode through the opening, their weapons trained on Eli. Their leader, a Andorian with filed teeth and elaborate tattoos, grinned unpleasantly. "Dr. Reeves, I presume," he said in accented standard. "We've heard such interesting stories about your work here. Something about taming one of those Voidfang creatures." "I don't know what you're talking about," Eli replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm just conducting atmospheric surveys." The pirate leader laughed. "Don't insult my intelligence. Do you have any idea what a trained Voidfang would be worth on the black market? Military applications alone would bring millions. Now you're going to help us capture your pet, or we're going to make this unpleasant for everyone involved." Eli's mind raced. Even if she wanted to help them, she couldn't deliver Mojo like some domesticated animal. He was a free, intelligent being who chose to interact with her. But explaining that to pirates seemed unlikely to be productive. "He's not here," she said finally. "The Voidfangs don't stay in one place. He could be anywhere in the system by now." "Then you'll help us track him down," the pirate snarled, grabbing her arm roughly. "And you'd better hope he's as tame as the stories say, because if we have to hunt him down the hard way..." The pirate never finished his sentence. The station's lights went out suddenly, plunging them into darkness. Emergency illumination kicked in, a moment later casting everything in an eerie red glow. But in that brief moment of darkness, something had changed. A low, harmonic sound filled the air, a sound Eli recognized immediately. "Mojo," she breathed. The pirates spun around, weapons raised, but there was nothing to see. The sound continued, seeming to come from everywhere at once. It was louder than any noise Eli had ever heard Mojo make, and it carried a distinctly different tone. This wasn't curiosity or contentment. This was anger. "What the hell?" The pirate leader began, then stopped as something moved in the shadows beyond the shattered doorway. A section of the corridor wall seemed to ripple and flow, and suddenly Mojo was there, scales shifting through patterns of deep red and black that Eli had never seen before. The pirates opened fire immediately, but their energy bolts seemed to have no effect. Mojo moved faster than something his size should have been able to move, flowing through the corridor like liquid lightning. In seconds, 2 of the pirates were down, their weapons scattered and sparking. The leader tried to use Eli as a shield, grabbing her and pressing a weapon to her head. "Stay back," he shouted at Mojo. "I'll kill her." For a moment, everything was still. Mojo hung suspended in the air just meters away, his 3 eyes fixed on the weapon at Eli's temple. His scales had gone completely black except for silver patterns that pulsed in rhythm with his breathing. Then Eli did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She reached out and placed her hand on what she could reach of Mojo's flank. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'm okay." The response was immediate. Mojo's scales shifted to a gentle blue-green, and he lowered himself slightly, but his attention never left the pirate holding her. "You see?" the pirate said nervously. "It does what you tell it. Now call it off and come with us." Eli corrected firmly. "And he's not mine to command. He's choosing to be here. I don't care what pronouns you use for the damn thing, just..." The pirate's voice cut off as Mojo moved again, but this time he moved around them, herding them toward the door. The message was clear: leave now. The remaining pirate needed no further encouragement. He released Eli and ran, practically diving for his ship. Within minutes, all 3 vessels were lifting off, disappearing into the crimson sky as quickly as they'd arrived. Eli sank into a chair, adrenaline leaving her shaky. Mojo flowed over to her, his scales now showing soft patterns of concern. Very gently, he extended one fin and touched her shoulder, a gesture that had become his way of checking if she was all right. "I'm fine," she assured him, "but I think our secret is out." It didn't take long for the UGF to respond. Admiral Vex and General Dox arrived within days, accompanied by a full scientific survey team and what looked like enough firepower to level the station. Eli met them at the landing pad with Mojo, visible in the distance like a living shadow among the canyon walls. "Dr. Reeves." Admiral Vex began without preamble. "You have exceeded your mission parameters in a manner that borders on insubordination. You were sent here to gather data, not to establish contact with a potentially hostile species." "With all due respect, Admiral," Eli replied, "I gathered more useful data in 3 months than the previous teams managed in years. And Mojo isn't hostile, he's protective." General Dox stepped forward, his expression grim. "That creature attacked and injured 3 sentient beings. By any definition, that makes it dangerous. Those sentient beings were pirates who broke into this station with the intention of kidnapping Mojo for illegal trade. He was defending both himself and me." The argument continued for hours, with Eli presenting her findings and the military officials expressing their concerns about security and protocols. Finally, Admiral Vex called for a demonstration. "If this creature is truly as intelligent and controllable as you claim," he said, "then prove it. Show us that it can be reasoned with." Eli looked out toward the Canisons, where Mojo had taken refuge since the arrival of the military ships. She knew he was watching, knew he understood that these newcomers represented some kind of authority. But she also knew he wouldn't simply perform tricks on command. "He's not a pet," she said finally, "but I can try to facilitate communication." Over the next few days, Eli worked to establish a 3-way dialogue between herself, Mojo, and the UGF representatives. It was slow-going, complicated by the military personnel's obvious nervousness around a creature they still saw primarily as a threat. The breakthrough came when General Dox mentioned the pirate problem in this sector. Eli translated the concern to Mojo through their scale pattern communication system, and his response was immediate and unambiguous. He could identify the pirates' ships, track their movements, even predict their raid patterns based on subtle environmental cues. More than that, Mojo made it clear that the Void Fangs were already doing this. The ship disappearances that had prompted Eli's mission weren't random attacks. They were a coordinated effort to drive the pirates away from Void Fang territory. The Void Fangs were protecting their space. Admiral Vex was skeptical until Mojo proved his point by leading them to a pirate cache hidden in an asteroid field 3 systems away. The cache contained stolen goods worth millions of credits, along with evidence of planned raids on UGF shipping lanes. "This changes things," the Admiral admitted as they stood in the recovered treasure vault. "If the Void Fangs are actively combating piracy in this region, then they're not the enemy," Eli finished. "They're potential allies." The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in UGF history. Establishing formal diplomatic relations with a species that communicated primarily through bioluminescent patterns and had no concept of written language required creativity and patience from all parties involved. Eli served as the primary translator, spending weeks refining the communication protocols she'd developed with Mojo. Other Void Fangs began to appear, apparently drawn by some signal from Mojo that the humans could now be trusted. Each individual had their own pattern variations, their own voice, in the scale color language. The final agreement was unprecedented. The UGF established a permanent research station on Epsilon 9 dedicated to furthering human Void Fang relations. The Void Fangs would continue to patrol their territory, working to eliminate piracy, while the UGF provided medical support and technological assistance where appropriate. Mojo became something of an ambassador, the first Void Fang to maintain regular contact with human space. But to Eli, he remained what he'd always been, a friend who had taught her that understanding was always preferable to fear. Standing on the observation deck of the new research station, watching Mojo glide through the canyon below, Eli reflected on how much her life had changed. She'd come to Epsilon 9 to study a dangerous predator and found instead an intelligent, complex individual who had become as protective of her as any brother. The scale patterns on Mojo's hide shifted to a familiar blue-green as he noticed her watching him. Even at this distance, she could read his meaning: contentment, friendship, home. Eli smiled and touched the window in a gesture she knew he would see. Sometimes the galaxy's greatest discoveries came not from maintaining proper distance and scientific objectivity, but from reaching out with an open hand and an open heart. In the months that followed, the partnership between humans and Void Fangs revolutionized space security in the outer sectors. Piracy dropped to almost nothing as the combined efforts of UGF patrols and Void Fang pack hunting eliminated most criminal operations. But for Eli, the real victory wasn't in the statistics or the diplomatic accolades. It was in the simple fact that she had looked past fear and prejudice to find understanding. She had fed one of the galaxy's most feared predators, and in return, gained not just a guardian, but a friend whose loyalty transcended species boundaries. The universe, she had learned, was far more wonderful when you approached it with curiosity rather than fear. And sometimes the most dangerous-looking creatures could become the most trusted allies if you were brave enough to offer them a chance.